Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hello, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hello, and welcome back to the paddock. Today you have Ito, Amy, Chelsea, Melissa, and Drea, and they are going to talk about all things Spanish GP and, as always, predictions for the upcoming weekends. And we're going to go ahead and start with a little bit of a Spanish track background for y'all.
Thank you, Hannah. So, the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya was built in 1991 and began hosting the Spanish Grand Prix that same year. The circuit is 2.894 miles long, also 4.65 kilometers long, with long straights and many corners. The circuit is located outside of Barcelona, so it's not really in Barcelona nor in Catalonia. It actually had like three different city names. And when it was first built, it was known as the Circuit de Catalunya up until 2013, when a sponsorship deal with the Barcelona City Council made an agreement with the track, then adding Barcelona into the name. The construction of the track also happened at the same time as Barcelona was preparing for the upcoming Olympics taking place the following year in 1992. And in that, the track acted as the start and finish line for the road team trial cycling event. Also, a little fun fact about this, the track sometimes can be confused with I'm gonna butcher this terribly, the Montjuic circuit, which is a street circuit that's actually located in Barcelona, unlike the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya. This circuit in particular hosted four Grand Prix between 1969 to 1975. The Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya is frequently used by Formula One drivers and their mechanics for testing, causing them to be familiar with the track itself. It has been criticized since the drivers and mechanics are too familiar with the track and it leads to less on track action on race day.
And currently, the fastest lap on track is currently being held by Checo from last year's race. Some fun little facts about the track. Races moving forward with Formula One will be using the same layout that's been used by MotoGP races since 2021, which means they're removing the chicane in the last sector of the lap for Formula One, which had been used in every year previously since its introduction in 2007, which is meaning that the final corners for the Formula One cars will be a sweeping fast configuration that was last used in 2006.
The Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya also has some very memorable racing moments. First, we have the epic battle between Senna and Mansell going down the entire straight side by side, dueling for second place, ultimately leading Mansell to gaining that position and winning the race itself. In 1994, we saw Michael Schumacher finish in second place despite being only driving in fifth gear for more than half of the race. And then 2 years later, in 96, we saw Schumacher win the Grand Prix for the first time as a Ferrari driver. A decade later, in 2006, we saw our favorite Fernando Alonso win the race, becoming the first Spanish Formula One driver winning at his home race. And lastly, another decade later, in 2016, we saw a crash from the Mercedes. The Mercedes team, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, take each other out, causing for Max Verstappen to win his first race with Red Bull. Also, at this particular race in 2016, Max became the youngest driver to win a race, youngest driver to be on the podium, and youngest driver to lead a lap, in addition to being the first Dutchman to win an F1 race.
And last year, we actually saw Max Verstappen on his third consecutive win in the championship, with Sergio in second and Russell in third. Max did have some issues in the race last year with DRS and eating some gravel, so maybe we'll see a little repeat of some issues on turn 4 again, because a few other drivers ate gravel there too. We also saw an amazing race from Hamilton, where he came up from P19 after colliding with Kevin and getting a puncture on the front left, before finishing the race at P5 behind my favorite Sainz.
Speaking of Lewis's race, him and Kevin collided in the first lap at turn 4. So there's one more turn 4 thing. And during that time, Lewis had said to his team, after coming in for the pits and realizing he had dropped so far back, was like, hey, maybe we should just save the engine, guys. Just save the engine. And the team said, dude, we can get P8, like we can still get points. So the fact that the team projected him for P8 and he ended up finishing 5th is pretty amazing. That race was also the race where Lewis started on mediums and everyone else started on softs. So once he pitted that second lap, everyone had softs, which is kind of rare for everyone to have the same tire because that kind of means they're all in the same tire strategy. This Grand Prix is also where we witnessed two greats battling it out. Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel battled for 13th before Alonso overtook Vettel with DRS. And speaking of DRS, this is where Max had his iconic problems, and he kept yelling at Red Bull, and they kept telling him, like, I think you're pressing the button too many times. And he goes, I'm just trying to get it open. I don't know what else to do. If you haven't seen it, later on, they actually made him a trophy that he keeps right next to him. He showed it on a stream. So that is pretty funny. That's where this came from when he talks about that trophy. This is the race they're talking about. Other things that happened were turn 4 had a gust of wind and Max spun out. And the team told him, oh, it was just a gust. And he had a lot of problems that race, which is amazing that he won.
We did also sadly have 2 DNFs. There was one being our Ferrari boy, Charles, who had placed pole for the qualies, but after dealing with some engine issues on lap 27 and having the lead, he had to get out. And then Zoe from Alfa Romeo due to a technical problem.
Some semi-race related things that were factors both on the race and outside of it were this is where Lando looked really, really sick and sounded really, really bad. And everyone's like, are you okay? He ended up having tonsillitis, but he still raced the whole race and finished it out in the points at P8. So that's also amazing, which is where Lewis was projected to finish. And then team radios, honestly, just go rewatch this race for team radios alone, because this is where we had, again, Max in his DRS and telling him he had a gust of wind. We had George being told to cool down his car, even though there was absolutely nobody in front of him at that moment. There was a huge gap. And then there was also Checo's iconic, that's unfair, but okay. And that leads into things that happened at the Monaco Grand Prix in 2022. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, you should. There were a lot of things that happened there that led to the whole season. And then this year, too.
And speaking of this year, we have some predictions. God knows if they're going to happen, but we have them. Which, look, with this being known as a power track, thanks to the solid mix of some high and low speed spots, and there's a third turn challenge. Although I think turn 4 is trumping these drivers a bit more because they're all eating it there. So I have to acknowledge that Red Bull might be on the podium. I have to. However, and here's hoping I'm not jinxing it, I need to see a Spanish driver up there too. Whether it's Carlos, I wish, or Alonso, I also wish. I'm predicting that we see Ferrari and Aston fight for a place on the podium. I don't care if it's second, I don't care if it's third. I want it to be first. I need it to be podium. Also, like we talked about earlier, there are a few gravel eaters on turn 4, Carlos being one of them, which is why he got 4th place last year. So maybe this year we can skip that and just go straight to the podium. Would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, a podium would indeed be nice for anyone except maybe Red Bull. But that's just me. But as you might remember, I usually go, or at least for Monaco, I went slightly crazy in terms of podium predictions, where I predicted Charles in P1, Pierre P2, and Alex P3. As we know by now, that sadly didn't come true whatsoever, even if we saw the other Frenchman on the podium in P3, which, I mean, I count that as like half a win. However, that outcome, because it didn't come true, makes me question whether I should go rogue again this week or whether I should be a bit more sensible, or whether really a combination of both would be best. If I were to go the combo, right, I would say Alonso on the podium since he has podiumed at all but one race this season. My delusional self would place him P1 because it would be iconic if he won his 33rd race at his home. The other two people I would see on the podium using kind of the same logic, would be Max and Carlos. While I would love a Spanish 1-2 at Barcelona, the rational part of my brain insists on Max ahead of Carlos. Yet my delusional heart wins and would love to see a substitution of Charles for Carlos on the podium, or Max. Honestly, more so Max, because I want my Ferrari boys on the podium. But I would say with my prediction of Alonso, Verstappen, and Sainz, I would be a bit more realistic, because it could come true in some shape or form. At the same time, hear me out. We got a very good look at the Red Bull floor at Monaco because of Checo's crash. And maybe, just maybe, that means the end of their dominance. I mean, is that a reach? Sure. But maybe it will even be just slightly dimmed. We just need some sort of fight at this point. But at the same time, I know that if that fight were to actually happen, it couldn't happen by the time this weekend rolled around, because that's just not enough time. So maybe after summer break, who knows?
So I saw earlier this week on Twitter from the page Ferrari News that it appears that Ferrari is actually bringing some upgrades to this particular Grand Prix. It is said on that page that Ferrari are bringing, quote, a major upgrade package to Barcelona, but no new front suspension, end quote. The SF23 will have a completely revised floor and visible changes to the bodywork. Again, according to Ferrari News, Ferrari aims not only to get more downforce out of the car, but also get more consistency, which is what we need. As for my predictions, we all know at least one, if not both Red Bulls will most likely be on the podium, but I am rooting for Carlos to finish out the race on the podium. In my perfect and delusional world, it would be Fernando in P1, Carlos in P2, and Checo in P3 for a complete Hispanic podium. So boys, please be on, as Carlos said, full Latino mode this weekend.
Okay. Now, before I start my predictions, I do want to bring some things up because, as Melissa brought up, Ferrari is bringing some upgrades to Spain, and Aston Martin brought some upgrades to Monaco that will hopefully be shown more effective in Barcelona to hopefully see a Fernando P1. Who knows? They brought some changes to their front suspension, specifically the upper wishbone, to improve oncoming airflow. They brought changes to the front wheel deflectors, which will allow for better interaction with the air coming off the front wingtip area of the car. And they brought some changes to the rear suspension, including revised fairings to boost the effectiveness of the corresponding brake ducts, while also assisting with airflow. According to some speculation that's been online, it's presumed that this could potentially make Aston 0.02 of a second faster, which, while it doesn't sound like much, could really have a lot of impact. For my personal predictions, like a lot of other people have brought up, I would love to see a Latin podium. It would be fantastic. I would love to see Carlos on a podium, maybe Fernando. Checo would be nice, but I'm kind of honestly hoping for an Aston Martin double podium with Chile in the mix, just because I think it would be fantastic to see. I know that sounds a little bit crazy coming from the resident Red Bull girl, but I really do want to see some variety in our podiums. I'm definitely expecting some questionable strategy calls. Maybe not having any DRS issues would be fantastic, but who knows? Maybe we'll get a repeat of last year. I don't know about everybody else, but I loved the one-off race kit that Charles brought to Monaco, and I would love to see Carlos, maybe even Fernando, bring out a full custom kit for their home race. I know that Carlos is bringing his helmet, he's got new racing shoes, but I'm hoping that he's going to do like a custom one-off race suit. I think that would be fantastic. I'd love to get everybody else's speculations on the lower part of the grid. Maybe are we going to see Kevin Magnussen in the points? Maybe a Valtteri Bottas sighting? I would love to see both of those things occur.
Actually, Amy, Carlos, is going to debut a special race suit, not just the shoes and the helmet. It's the full gear. And it looks fire. It's red, black, and yellow. It's gorge. And he also published a new team shirt with the 55 on the back, a new cap, everything. He basically published everything that Charles did for Monaco, he did for Spain. But you brought up a good point. What about the midfield? And honestly, because it's such a power track or predictable track, if you will, I don't see much happening. But at the same time, everyone's so close together that anything could happen at the same time, especially if they eat gravel at turn 4.
Also for this weekend, I don't know if you guys keep up with Ray-Ban as much as I do, because I love me a good pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. Carlos did the same thing as Charles did last weekend for their home Grand Prix. They're releasing special edition Carlos Sainz design or collaboration sunglasses on the Ray-Ban website. The price itself, it's around the high 200s, with tax and everything will be in the low 300s. But if you're in that treat yourself mood, I say go for it, because I'm over here debating on getting the ones that Charles designed. And both of them are absolute fire.
Usually if I give a prediction, it backfires and I jinx either the team or the driver that I have stated. So I will say this, and if it is true, then I am good luck, and I will do it again next race. But if it turns out to be wrong and I jinx them, I'm just not doing them again, because it backfires so bad. Last time I said Lando, man was so far in the backfield, it was not even funny. Man was just a back marker. So, statement of fact, I honestly can say this, nothing will happen. Max will win. That one, not even jinxing it, it's just a statement of fact. Max will win. Okay, saying what we're all thinking, Fernando for P2. Because he's been getting P2 consistently also for 5 races? So that one, also not jinxing anyone. Statement of fact, nothing out of the ordinary. This one is where we're going to see if I'm jinxing them or not, if I'm bad luck or not. Carlos for P3, because I want him to be on the podium for his home race. If he makes it higher, then I will fully be behind that. Full send. Okay, Carlos, full send. Thing is, if I jinx him, I am so sorry, everyone, and I will not do it again.
Okay, now I want to talk about a few little recent news things that have happened in the Formula One world for people who may not have seen it. Recently, it was announced that McLaren has signed Rob Marshall from Red Bull as their new technical director of engineering and design. He is leaving Red Bull after 17 years. He will be starting with McLaren January 1st of 2024. During his time with Red Bull, he was most notably known as their chief engineering officer. I know Red Bull's probably going to hate to see him go, but I think he is leaving after Barcelona and will be no longer with the team moving forward. Everybody probably knows what he looks like. They just don't know his name. He's a lot of the time on their podiums when they win. If you Google him, you'll recognize his face, I'm pretty sure.
McLaren said if we can't beat them, buy them.
It's not just McLaren, though, because Aston Martin has done some similar things. I think the concept of if we can't beat them, we're going to poach your employees is definitely common practice amongst Formula One team principals. I mean, you want the best on your team. If they happen to work for somebody else, oh well.
But then the fact that Ferrari's Mekis is going to AlphaTauri next year at some point would actually disprove that theory, because AlphaTauri is way stronger. But them being part of Red Bull, you think they would make, quote unquote, better strategic decision. At the same time, the reverse is true, that a few Red Bull people are going to Ferrari. So maybe it was we get a team principal, you get a few engineers. That was the trade. Who knows? I don't know.
All I know, last weekend when all the teams saw that Red Bull up in the air, every single person on the engineering side were like that SpongeBob and Patrick meme, write that down, write that down. That's all I know. That they definitely did that. They were like, draw it, write it, something, so we can see what's going on under that machine of a car.
I mean, I'm no engineer, but I've studied the floor. Like, I've looked at the pictures and I've looked at the Merc pictures for like comparison. And honestly, I don't really see a difference. But I mean, Casey's not on here right now, and she's our resident engineering girly. So maybe there is a difference. I don't know.
There is definitely a difference. Can I explain all of it as well as Casey can? Definitely not. But it is definitely there. I spent probably a good half an hour, 45 minutes looking at the video clip of the car, and I bet you all of the engineers in the garages were like sitting there afterwards going frame by frame of the F1 live recording going, ooh, let's zoom in on that. Let's get in on this. Let's look at that. Like, everybody was out there with magnifying glasses, hands down. But it's definitely different. And I think Adrian Newey is probably really upset that his secret sauce may have been revealed.
You know who else might be upset that their car got revealed? Mercedes, aka Toto Wolff. Because I remember seeing memes come up after that whole incident when the car was on the crane. That was like, you know, when you guys get off like roller coasters, there's a pictures, and usually you can't take a picture on your phone. It forces you to buy it. So it just reminded me like that meme in particular, the guy was like moving around so like you can block the picture that you're trying to take. And that was probably the people on Mercedes and Total Wolf. And who knows, maybe someone got an epic picture from their window minding their business that morning.
Did you guys see the meme of the car hanging outside an airplane window on the way to Spain? I asked if they had budget cuts. That was amazing. I also like when teams can joke about these things because it makes it so much more entertaining on social media.
We've got to give 10 points to the team admins for giving us the grade A content week in, week out, every single day, even when there's not a race. They're still finding a way to give us some fantastic content. If people don't follow F1 teams or their sponsors on Twitter, I highly recommend it. Especially the Duracell admins. They're absolutely hilarious and always provide us the weirdest content, like how many AA batteries is Logan Sargent?
Or even the drivers, because after the stuff in Monaco, whenever Charles pushed off, or Charles impeded Lando, Lando tweeted the just an incident. And then there were pictures later of them walking out of the steward's office and Lando's flipping off Charles. And he's just laughing. So they are getting really good. I think we can tell who runs their own accounts and who doesn't.
Like I suggested to follow the admins, F1 Twitter as a whole is just a fun space to be in, especially if you are an F1 fan. It's just going to keep you entertained for days.
Also, did we see that Mick is finally getting his first test drive in a Mercedes? As we mentioned earlier, Catalunya is very much known to be a testing track. I mean, basically pre-COVID, they used to do all the preseason testing at Catalunya instead of Bahrain. And therefore, it is known as a testing track. And George, as well as Mick, are test driving the week after the GP. Like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, George is on the Tuesday after and Mick's on the Wednesday after. And I'm just ready to see Mick behind the wheel of an F1 car again. Like, Toto, you saved that boy. Use him.
I'm, for one, very happy and excited that he's finally get the opportunity to actually drive that car. Because every time they, like, show Toto and Mick's next to him, I'm just, like, in my mind, I'm like, I feel like Mick's just like, I'm just happy to be here and very thankful and appreciative that you guys took me in. And, like, he's probably learning so much from such an amazing team. So I'm really excited to see how the testing goes for him in the following week.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited to see Mick behind the wheel of an F1 car again. But more importantly, I am so excited to see him in a Mercedes uniform. I am so here for the Mick-Sadies era. I need this so badly. You know, Rachel is probably really excited. Her and I are definitely the shoot me girls of the bunch. I cannot wait to see him in a Mercedes uniform, let alone behind a freaking car again.
I think it might happen because Toto is kind of taking him under his wing. And whenever Ocon had to take a year off, Toto got him back in. And you know what? He was on the podium. Is he with Mercedes? Not yet, but he was on the podium last week. So Toto's got some magic.
I mean, Toto has done that not only with Ocon, but also Nick DeVries and Alex Albon. So does 3 prove the theory? Maybe. Let's hope. Plus also, I feel like Mick in Mercedes just gives me his dad in Mercedes. And that was great. Honestly. Like, Michael going to, like, rejoining F1 after retiring because he wanted to build up a team like he built up Ferrari was just gold. And that whole history is just, I'm speechless. Plus also, as She Loves F1 said, I feel like in the black race suit, Mick is definitely in his handsome devil Mick era from his previous sweet angel Mick era at Haas.
We do have to give Toto some massive credit. The man has this habit of finding the right drivers and really just building them up. As Ito said, he's done it with Ocon. He did it with Nick DeVries. He did it a little bit with Stoffel Van Dorn, who's now the Aston Martin reserve driver. But watching Stoffel last year when he was still with Mercedes, he was so much more confident than I think I've ever seen him behind the wheel of a car. And we just need to give 10 points to Toto Wolff because the man is a genius. I am very excited for the full circle moment that is Mick being at Mercedes because it just kind of feels right.
I was literally about to say that, Amy. It gives me a full circle moment vibes with Michael being there and now Mick being there. And I know it's not an official driver's seat. He's at least getting his toes wet and like one hell of a great car. And that experience can take him so far, as mentioned before, with other drivers Toto has worked with.
And that is our predictions. This week, we're going to close out the episode with Driver of the Week, or, well, I should say drivers. And that is the Spanish men themselves, Carlos and Alonso. Good luck. We need you on the podium. Please get there.
Definitely some spicy predictions for this weekend. I'm definitely hoping we get both of our Spanish drivers on the podium. And if you all have any predictions, please do reach out to us on our socials so we can see what you think and have a little chat about it. Everywhere is at Paddock Girls Podcast except for Twitter. She is at Paddock Girls Pod. We just want to thank you so much for joining us in the paddock this week and all of our weeks we've had so far and many more. See you at the next race. Bye, Craig.
See ya, Craig.
Adios, Craig.
Later, Craig.
Bye again, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.